Welcome back to the Explicit Measures podcast with Tommy and Mike. Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to the podcast.
Good morning, Mike. How you doing?
Oh, we're doing well. It's just the week is clipping along. I can't believe January is almost over. It's been moving by incredibly fast, so it's good. I think it's a good sign. Things are moving along quickly, and I can't complain. But there's a lot of nice things. We've hit January. Typically, January is a very quiet month. There's not a lot of noise happening in the Microsoft Fabric space or Power BI space for that matter. But it's been nice to have a couple announcements come out. We've had some actual news topics come out here recently. But before we get into the news, let's do a quick topic today. Our main topic today will be Copilot will be, insert your word here, Copilot will be blank to your organization. We're going to kind of just unpack this new Copilot Capacity. Copilot Capacity is a new feature that has just been recently announced from the Microsoft on the blog. And we're going to unpack that idea and just try and go through the article a little bit just to understand where Copilot is fitting. Tommy, I know you're all up on the AI space. Have you heard about this rumbling in the market here?
Oh, the DeepSeek.
Okay, I knew you would have heard about it. So DeepSeek has come out, and so my understanding is DeepSeek is this Chinese-based AI platform that has just recently been released in the last 4 or 5 days, and already it's turning people on their heads. Apparently, shockingly, there's been a chip shortage or a lack of high-end NVIDIA chips going over to China, but they were able to produce a model that is on par with OpenAI's expensive chips for a fraction of the cost. So one, not only a fraction of the cost because they're using older hardware, but fraction of the cost to even train the model. It was much, much cheaper and much faster to train. So it's very interesting to see that this is coming out so quickly. They're saying this is going to shake up the industry and the AI bubble may be popping. So anyways, we'll have to talk about that a little bit more too later on in there as well, especially now that we're going to discuss a little bit more about Copilot. We'll have to see where this market is going to shift and where it's going to go moving forward.
I'll tell you what, I wish I was Gordon Moore, because if I founded the idea of Moore's Law, that's going to keep proving true, which is insane. If you never heard of Moore's Law, it's simply this observation that the number of transistors, how things compute, doubles every 2 years. And I think this was something in the 60s, like 65. And he's like, the way we're going with technology is going to keep doubling. It's going to keep getting cheaper to do things. It hasn't been false. And it's insane for someone to make that claim.
I feel like that trend was good until we hit this parallel computing and AI space. I feel like Moore's Law was clipping along. I believe Moore's Law was applying to, and I'm not sure that you can't quote me on this one, but I thought it was applying to the CPU, the computer processing chip itself. So every year it's doubling?
2 years.
Every 2 years. Every 2 years, the amount of transistors they could put on an actual computer chip was doubling. And so they kept dropping the size of these resistors, 30 nanometer architectures, 10 nanometers, 2 nanometer. I don't know what they're at right now, but they're at something absurd, 5-7 nanometer transistors on these chips to make them, one, they're much more efficient when they're so small, but then they can stick a lot more of them on a chip. So I think we've hit the limit, the physical limit of Moore's Law on a single chip. But I think, Tommy, maybe what you're referring to now is people are now building the architecture has changed on computers. It's no longer just one processing unit and how fast can that one unit go. It's like how many units can I put on a machine, right? This AI training stuff is thousands, tens of thousands of computer processing units that are all stuck together, working together. This is incredible. Anyways, it's pretty neat stuff. I know you're all into this stuff as well. All right, with that, let's jump into some news. Tommy, we have one that I'm kind of passionate here about. Is I do a lot of Power BI embedded projects, and there is a new announcement. So we have import mode and we have direct query mode in our semantic models. We have now, with the advent of the Lakehouse, we have the ability for us to add a third option, which is direct lake. So this is the ability of having a Lakehouse support your Power BI reports. I will admit, I have been doing some internal testing on models that were on import mode versus direct lake mode. That first load of that model, if it's been evicted, takes a little bit longer for that report to show up. So it definitely spins a bit more while the computer figures out how to get the model data into the memory of the computer. But once it's in memory, it actually hums along pretty well. It doesn't
Yeah.
it has very little lag or lead time. So that's kind of nice to have that working smoothly there. The article is here. I'll put the article in the chat for people. Tommy, do you use Power BI embedded for anything at this time?
There's been projects, not nearly, I think, to the capacity that you've done it, and products that some of the things you built, but definitely have done a few things where it's like, this is pretty neat. Like the potential of solutions that you can develop around this are incredible. It's an impressive thing that Microsoft's built.
Yeah, I like this whole direct lake thing. My only comment here on this one, so there is some distinct limitations on this one that I do want to point out here. Um, you must use, if you're going to use the direct lake models in embedded, which is great because now I can just focus more of my attention
Sure.
on doing the
Yeah.
data engineering in the lake house and not have to worry about the import. And dude, I just love direct lake. I think direct lake's a really neat feature. The fact that I don't have to wait for data to load into a semantic model is, well, I don't have to load it in an import method, right? Whatever is in the lake is what will be represented in the model, which is very nice. This is only supported with the embed token version 2. So there's our two versions of embedded token. So you need to make sure you're using the most modern version of the embedded token. And then there's only fixed identities. So you need a fixed identity to be able to use it. And it's described in the article, but what that means, there is no single sign-on. So this means basically the app owns the data mentality. You need a single service principal that will be accessing the data. If you're already using embedded with app owns data, then this will work. This is really more for like a feature for an ISV solution, independent solution provider. Is that what that is?
I
ISV.
see. Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
That
And
that
then
was an old life
the
for
V
me.
sounds like it should have been a P, but
Or
it's
vendor.
vendor. Maybe it's vendor or
It's a
something.
vendor. It's vendor. It's
Yeah.
vendor.
And then the final thing here is they're allowing access to these direct lake models using the service principal. Microsoft's best practice is to use service principals and a service principal profile
Mhm.
with embedded solutions. The downside of this is if you're using the direct lake models, the direct lake models cannot use a service principal with profile. They must only use a service principal, which is a little bit different from their actual guidance around, if you're doing a multi-tenant embedded solution, they want you to use profiles, service principal profiles with Power BI to go get the data. So I find that to be a little bit, it's in public preview. So this is a preview area. I'm hoping that they figure out the profiles thing fairly soon here. I think it's a big miss if they don't go to GA with actually having the profiles attached, because when you're building embedded and you're trying to do
Scalability. Yeah.
securely, right? That's a security thing, right? That's Microsoft says this is what you should do for security. Well, then why can't I use direct lake with security? I mean, or this type of security seems to make a gap in an understanding of what the feature should be doing. So
It is impressive though, because with the direct lake, honestly, my most impressive feature, and I think a lot of saving face with, especially if you're doing embedded solutions, I'm honestly still amazed when I change a measure in the service and automatically that change is reflected without a refresh in that model. It's
mhm.
kind of that live connection almost look, but it is so seamless. It's almost scary, especially when you come from 9 years of, if you started with ODBC and you've now gotten to direct lake, wow.
Yes, I agree with that one. Let's go over the features. Tommy, you picked up a feature from the blog here. Let's transition to our other news item.
Yeah, well, before I do, I got a
Oh yeah, go
story
ahead.
for you, Mike. So,
Go ahead.
my back is a little sore. I had my first old man twang on my back this
Uh
previous
oh.
weekend. Yeah,
Uh oh.
this has never happened, but I need to preface it because I want to bring a little humor to the podcast. Not a little more humor, I should say. So we just got a Blackstone steel grill,
Yep.
basically,
Yep.
which is pretty cool. But we won it. The reason we won it was we went to the school's gala, the auction thing, the really nice thing that you do at your school to raise money for teachers. It's an awesome thing. I don't do well at these events because, Mike, you may have picked this up over the last 45 years we've done the podcast. I'm a clumsy person. I'm not a slob, but I'm not classy. And these events, it's a tie. It's, you got to put everything down when
Mhm.
you sit up, you got to buckle. You want to buckle. I don't even know the right word. Button. When you sit down. If I sit at a table for dinner and there's more than two cups for you, I'm not going to do well. It's just not going to turn out. So
Mhm.
we're at this event. You're talking to other dads at your meet. Like, so what are you doing? It's always still hard to explain what I do, kind of thing. And like, and I, you're like, yeah, my own business. I do Power BI. They look at you like, okay, I don't know what that is. And my go-to bit is baseball stats for grown-ups. Um,
That's a good one. That's a good
immediately,
analogy.
immediately we sit down. I like reach, of course, and I'm none of this I'm about to say I'm exaggerating. This is just what happened this is my life. The bread came to the table. I'm like, great. So I reached for the bread. Immediately did not know my wife's wine glass was right next to her, the whole wine glass on her dress. So, this is how we start, kind of
Oh
thing.
boy. Oh boy.
And
This feels like
yeah,
a movie starting out.
yeah, but I have to give a lot of props to my wife. Very classy how she handled it. She just got the black towel. She
She just
put it on
slapped you
the
and left.
table. No, she didn't. She's classy. She's classy. She levels me up. And immediately kind
It's
of
always
takes
good to
care
marry
of
up.
it.
It's always good
It
to marry
really
up.
is. And just kind of cleaned it well. I'm really embarrassed. People are looking at me. It was a table. We didn't know who they were. They were like, "Who's this guy?" I'm like, only got one piece of bread. I want to take the whole basket because no one's touching it. So it's like, what are
Mhm.
we doing here? Um, but then they do these auctions, and the one that they did that they do is called paddle timer. So the principal comes up, undisclosed time on this timer.
Yeah.
The last person to raise their paddle for like $25-$50 wins this griddle. So for fifty
Okay.
dollars in impeccable timing, I got the last one. I
No
was
way.
Now, what I should have done was maybe one of these, like little, Prince waves, king waves, like thank you kind of thing.
Tommy did not do that. His Italian emotions, I can see this already taking
The,
over this
the
moment.
shrill excitement of the win was a fist pump, yeah, yeah, kind of thing. And then I
Oh,
just realized, and then you just kind of look, and everyone's like, yeah, very nice, kind of thing. And I'm like, oh, and then there's the hors d'oeuvres, Mike. Like the hors d'oeuvres are incredible. They have the coconut shrimp, the hot dog with the bacon all around it. I want to just take the plate, go to the other room, and watch a game, but you can't. So, anyways, go back to why the back's a problem. We had to pick
mhm,
up the griddle yesterday. We're putting in the van, and it's the first time I ever felt the twing in your back,
mhm,
which
mhm.
if you are young and going, that'll never happen to me, it will. It will, because it's just
Yeah.
what life is. So,
Oh, I've had a couple. I'm a little bit older than you, Tommy, if you remember. I have a little more gray in
yeah,
my
you got
beard.
a little more wisdom. We'll call it wisdom. So,
Well, whatever. Stupidity,
and if we're
wisdom.
doing based on the beard, a lot more wisdom. Yeah.
Well, I have done a couple of those, and I have found it's like if I work hard a day or two, it's like a day or two after is when my back is like it's tired now. I'm done, and then
Yeah.
it's the simple thing. You like lean over the sink to go grab something from the sink or something like that, and then your back's like, nope, I don't have it anymore. We're done. So yeah, I can relate to your story
Yeah.
about throwing your back out on certain random things, and it just hurts. It just like you
Yeah.
just don't even move.
Well, it's you want to turn left, and instead of just turning your neck, it's a whole what? Huh? Like the
Yeah, your
whole
whole
body has
torso.
to shift. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I get that. We
So,
just took our family just went out and took all of our kids skiing.
oh,
We're
that's asking
teaching.
for it.
That's asking for it here. So I have been prepping a little bit. I know I realize I'm not as young as I used to be. When I was young, I could just get up, get on my snowboard, and just go, and we could just go snowboarding for a day and come back no problem. I realize now that in my age, I have to kind of prepare myself. So I've been doing like walking on the treadmill, making sure I get enough time in. Like I got to start exercising a little bit before I go, or else I know I'm going to definitely hurt something. I bought some new bindings for my snowboard that allows
Oh,
me to like step in and step out. So what I thought it was great
yeah.
and much easier than what I was doing in the past, which was wonderful. I don't have to bend down as nearly as much, but you still have to bend down and grab this little lever to like uncheck your
Mm.
foot, pull your foot out. And my walking on treadmill, the exercise I was doing at home, there is nothing that was happening in my obliques on the sides. So I had to like bend over on the side and like reach really far over and go undo the binding. And I was like, oh my word, that's a muscle I've never used in my life.
No. No, and I think for getting older, you don't work your biceps or your chest. You work the muscles where if I have to bend down to tie my shoes, that's the muscle I need to work because
I'm
that is
working
the
with
most
my finger muscles are very strong. I can type really good.
Yeah. I'm one of the fastest typers in this side of the Mississippi.
I'm
So
fastest typer in my family.
yeah.
So that I'm good at, but not much other exercising or lifting heavy things exercising. So
So needless to say, if you see me slightly going farther
just,
down, you'll know
falling
why.
off the camera. Tommy's just
Right.
slowly drifting out of frame.
Right.
It's funny.
So yeah, but we're gonna make it. And you did mention an article that another Power BI article that came out, which by the way, Microsoft, way to go in January with all your updates. It's been awesome.
Yeah,
This is a
it hasn't been like a flood of things,
no,
but it's been a steady clip of just good releases through
yeah.
this February, this January, whatever month it is, this January so far.
We gave them a lot of stuff in December going, it's not going to be updated. And Microsoft literally said, hold my water coolant. Hold my liquid coolant and I will cool your GPU. That's what they said. And one of the big ones that I'm personally pretty intrigued to see how this goes. Positive optimism here with a little sprinkle of skepticism, but it is Copilot summaries and email subscriptions.
All right,
And
I'm curious to hear what this is. This is interesting. This is again. Why do I
yeah,
have to wait for DeepSeek to show up? I need Copilot. I mean, come on.
well,
Let's go ahead, Tommy. Give me what are you thinking
yeah.
here? What does this look like?
So this is simply the gist of it is you have your email subscriptions as you normally do, but what we can do with this now is simply say, you know what? On this particular subscription, when it's sent out, generate based on the data a summary. To me, this looks no different than the narrative summary that visual that you simply give a summary of what's on the context of that page. And it's simply now rather than being a visual, they simply said we're going to just plug this into the email. So the positive here is, I don't know, Mike, if you've used that narrative summary at all in production reports rather than just dabbling around.
Mhm.
I've seen a lot of positive reinforcement, a lot of positive commentary with clients, and even myself going, it's not bad, especially right out the gate. You can always customize it a bit based on what you want it to show. But even
Mhm.
if you just use it out of the box, it's been honestly, I would call it a positive, really helpful. Now I can add this to my email subscription, and where the dash of skepticism come is I don't know what it's going to generate.
Mm.
I can't
Yes.
customize this. I can't weight things like I can with a narrative visual, where I can say, "Hey, narrative text, we're going to talk about this. We're going to talk about this measure. Plug it in here." It's really just going to generate what it generates, and that's a little I think there's a lot of caution there. So, Mike, where do you land on this? Release, at least the release of this announcement.
Yeah, this is a good announcement. I think this is a very solid feature. I'm interested to see this one. Again, my hesitation here a little bit is, Copilot is right now the threshold to get to Copilot is only at the upper echelon of the SKUs that I'm playing with, right? So most of my SKUs are in the F2, F3, I mean F2, F4, F8 level. I mean, we're talking about getting organizations started. I do a lot of testing internally on my own stuff. I run a consulting firm, but I'm not a huge consulting firm. I don't have
Right.
the money to go out and go buy an F64 capacity and have that on and testing it all the time. So for me to go in and test a lot of these features, it's kind of a barrier to entry for a lot of, I would say, medium to small organizations. Larger
Yeah.
organizations may want to take note of this. Where I have found a lot of, the Copilot thing, so this feature particularly, right? Using this directly in emailing subscriptions and getting summaries of information.
Mhm.
I have found that the summaries that Copilot provides about data sets. So another place that I found Copilot showing up was you can build an exploration. An exploration is
Mhm. Another good
basically a
one.
table with a single visual attached to it. And so an exploration is an object you can go save into the workspace. There's a little button that says summarize the data set, and it has a little button here that you can like refresh rerun it. It will give you different summaries of the semantic model, and it does some interesting things like, hey, the date range starts from here to here. This column has 10 unique values. It does some generic summarization, but like that seems to me like, why would I need Copilot to do that? It just seems like it's giving me just some general statistics back about the model. And to your point, Tommy, why wouldn't I just have users summarizing the model a little bit better and having it give me that context, right? So I don't really love these features where they're trying to get it to auto summarize. To your point, I don't get to control it. I don't know if it's going to give out a good summary. When you're sending out emails to people, I think you're really looking for like regular known content that people are going to expect. I think you potentially could introduce an opportunity here that someone gets an email with some information in it that is misleading or not quite clear for what you need to deliver. Most of my experience is the Copilot experiences work really well when I'm doing very heavy code things, right? So to me, Copilot makes a lot of sense in DAX Query View. Copilot makes a lot of sense in Tyndall View. These are places where I think the Copilot makes a ton of sense because it can read the code that's there and suggest things that based on top of the information that's presented. So I think that's a better place for Copilot. I'm more leery about these other solutions where I don't really want to set up Copilot and forget it and just let it run.
I'm developing a data analyst manifesto, and it's a bunch of rules that you should always apply in situations. And Mike, to your point, this is something that could potentially experiment or, look at somebody's goals a different way. And one of my manifesto rules, we'll call it Rule 17, don't experiment with someone else's KPI. And if I'm going to put this in a summary and it's going to show something, even I'm not even going to say wonky or wrong, but not what someone's expecting, someone's going to have an issue with that. Someone's going to go, whoa, what do you mean 10%? They're going to have questions that you may not have the answer to because you didn't know where that number come from. And that to me is just on the road to distrust. So manifesto rule 17, don't mess with someone's KPIs.
And if I'm looking at the summary, I mean, looking at the feature here, it does an interesting job of like saying, here's the sales overview, here's revenue by sales page. I mean, my question here would be is how simple is this model to understand? I mean, again, and everything I do with anything that's AI generated, it always seems to make more sense to add additional documentation, descriptions, making sure your model is well-rounded. So I think part of this too is, and again, I don't know how this would be impacted. Does the Copilot do a better job summarizing the model when there's a lot more descriptions and details around where does each column come from? What does it stand for? What do you mean by sales region or country or, these other details? My assumption would be it should make the Copilot answer better based on those things. So again, I kind of lean on the fact that most of the models that I see in the natural world, but people build, they're not very well documented. They don't have all the information in them that they need. So my opinion is like, that's where we should really be starting, regardless of whether you're using Copilot or not. The experiences of using these semantic models across multiple experiences inside PowerBI.com, that's much better. So I would really like that to have, so walking away from this observationally, I think you're going to want to start spending a lot more time documenting your model and making sure your model is top notch with really good explanations. Because anytime then you throw Copilot at it, it'll make the Copilot answer questions much better.
1000%.
So that's where I would lean on this one. And to your point, Tommy, like again, looking at the output of this, right? It did like revenue by open sales stage, product line overview, revenue by fork. I feel like these are things that I would want to, if I'm going to use Copilot, I would want to prompt it with something. Like what you would normally do is say, hey, here's the Copilot. You're going to summarize this. I need you to produce a summary that has the following information in it. Like look for this KPI and summarize it by region. Like let it do the summary of that particular detail. That's fine. Or, hey, I have a visual on page 1. It's called this. Summarize this visual in text form and then send the email. So I think we need some, initial prompting that would then let you add your own prompt that gets run with the actual prompt to go get the data from the model. I think that's what I would need here to feel more confident about this feature instead of just turn on a switch and say Copilot it.
I was about to say,
right?
That's manifesto rule 24. Be wary of simple toggles. Because the fact that you just turn this on and there's no alert, you don't know what's going to generate, again, that can cause a lot of waves that you're not aware of.
Yes. Yeah. So also be aware here too, there are some considerations of this feature. This is not available in government clouds. So if you are in government, this is not going to be available to you. There's no summaries supported for dynamic per recipient subscriptions. So that's actually a feature where you put the recipient and information inside the semantic model and use a dynamic email management. and then your summary. If Copilot decides to slow down and go really slow for whatever reason, you may not even get a summary because Copilot took too long to generate the summary for the email. So interesting. Apparently, this is an issue that happens on really large reports where it doesn't actually get to summarize things. So again, interesting feature. I think Microsoft and every AI company is trying to put AI everywhere. This is another place where I feel like we're trying to fit a square peg in a round hole a little bit. We'll see where it goes. It could surprise me. I'll definitely try it out. I'll see how it works. But we'll see how we can get this to run inside our models. We'll see it'll be interesting. Be curious to feedback from other people as well on this feature. The feature is also in the chat window as well, in case you want to get to go in there. Anything else, Tommy, we should cover off on?
I think this is a pretty good walk to really what we want to talk about today. This is this topic. I'll tell everyone who's listening. As soon as it came out, Mike and I at the same time sent the link to each other, going, "Oh, we got to talk about this."
I would agree with that one very much so. All right, Tommy, give us a run up. What's our main topic here for today?
Yes. So Microsoft and Fabric have introduced, for those who are struggling or just simply don't have one of the highest licenses that you can get for Fabric, an F64 and above, the Copilot Capacity. We've talked about Copilot in spades. You were probably like, that sounds great, but I'm not spending X amount for my F64. Well, I don't even have Fabric. Well, guess what? Microsoft has introduced the new FCC license, the Fabric Copilot Capacity. This is a dedicated capacity that is assigned to individual users at your organization who can use Copilot. So right now, before this feature came out, if you wanted to use Copilot, it was assigned to a workspace because it was part of F64 and above. No F64, no Copilot for you. However, now with the FCC capacity or Copilot capacity, we simply purchase the capacity and assigned individual users or teams to that capacity. Now they can use Copilot in a pro, and you're gonna have to correct me, Mike, but I think it's just a pro workspace, or I'm not sure if it's premium workspaces as well. But that user can use Copilot really wherever they deem fit.
Well, so
Yeah.
I'll jump in there because I was able to skim into the article what you're
Oh,
asking for.
yeah.
It's users can be assigned an FCC to utilize Copilot in the following scenarios. Scenario number one, Power BI reports on a pro workspace. So you could use Copilot with a pro workspace. Again, licensing based on the workspace level, not the user level. The second option here is a Fabric workspace that is smaller than F64. So an FCC would allow you to use Copilot in these smaller use cases. And then finally, Fabric Copilot scenarios where Fabric workspaces are just purely smaller than F64. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I'm seeing here, this is Q&A that they have on the article. The initial launch, surprisingly, is only Power BI Pro workspaces. Premium per user will be supported soon as well.
Okay.
And they do not have any plans to support the A or embedded workspace capacities. So,
go ahead, Tommy.
no, I was just gonna say, like, so right off the bat, I think they've gotten the feedback that, yeah, there's a lot of smaller teams, to your point, that are simply never going to purchase an F64 because it's just not going to make sense for a lot of organizations that are smaller or mid-size. But they really, and Microsoft's trying to push Copilot. So that question was, how do we get Copilot out to more people? And this is their solution.
So what the article doesn't really illuminate to me is like, where do I buy this? Where does this get purchased from? So I don't really understand very detailed, like, what is the Fabric Copilot capacity? What I don't understand is, is this purchased from Azure? Is this purchased from, the PowerBI.com environment? Like, where does this come from?
Office.
That's a little bit gray to me right now. I'm not quite sure where I find these things, and how much does it cost per user? Like, there's no pricing in here. Is it a per user pricing? Is it a total cost? Right. Is it the same price as an F2? Like, what does this mean for Copilot?
That's a good point. And I'm assuming, based on the article, because there wasn't a documentation link, or at least I missed it, it talks about your FCC can be throttled, which is telling me that you have a capacity, you can assign as many users as you want, and it's not per user cost. But the more users you assign, the higher you're going to get to throttling that capacity. At least that's the takeaway. Because there was really no information there about a per user except by assigning it that way.
Well, look at this. We've got the real expert showing up here
Oh
talking
no,
about capacities.
we're talking false. Good, we got
No,
somebody
no.
who
I think
knows.
this is
Okay,
the article is a little bit gray here, and so feedback to Microsoft. Maybe add some more context here. But Guy in a Cube showed up. We very rarely have Guy in a Cube. So Guy in a Cube, welcome to the podcast. We appreciate you being here. So I see you purchase a regular fabric capacity, and then you designate it inside the settings of the fabric capacity to be a Copilot capacity. So the extent here is you could purchase an F2 and then designate that F2 as the Copilot capacity. So that's what I was missing. That's what's not very
yeah,
clear in the article to me, that okay, the order to get this is buy any capacity, turn it on as a Copilot capacity, and then you can use that as your capacity piece there as well. That's very informative. And the article's not very clear there. So maybe some additional
or
documentation
we're
would be
dumb.
helpful. Well, typically, a lot of these articles come out with the ability to see, okay, you're publishing the
Yeah,
feature, and then immediately it's followed up by, here's the learn more document. I don't see a link to the learn more. So that must
yeah.
be something that's there also as well.
Well, it's nice to have smart people that are listening. So
Well,
because
at least one
we're
person from
giving,
Microsoft is actually listening to the podcast.
yeah. So, Mike, this feature to me, there's a lot of ways that I would describe it. When I first read this article, I was honestly like, there's a bit of a few words. Finally, there's a bit of can't wait, and then there's a lot more of what are the restrictions. But I'm going to focus more on that finally feature here because to
Mm-hmm.
me, and I've heard from clients like, oh, I love this Copilot. We use it all the time in Office. I can just use it in Power BI, right? You're like,
Yeah.
well, how much do you have on hand? How much scratch you got? So basically,
I mean, so knowing what I know now, right? So the fact that I
Mhm.
can turn on an F2 capacity and dedicate that as the capacity for
Yeah,
the fabric. So there's some things I'm thinking through. I'm unpacking this, right? As we're reacting to the article. I like this feature a lot already now that I know I can turn on something that's dedicating itself to a fabric capacity. Pro users have been left out of this whole thing. There is some goodness that comes from fabric capacities. Anytime that I'm building things in like the Power Query, so in Power
yep.
Query or data flows,
Power Query.
data flows things need help there, and I can
Mhm.
link my desktop to Copilot and have Copilot run things through desktop. So to be able to expose that to more users across my organization, I think will be very beneficial. There is this ability to run Copilot and make report pages. Again, if you're looking for a quick win on a semantic model and build a report page with something, that would be helpful. Turn on Copilot, build me a report page on top of this data, and then let it kind of just start building you some things. It reduces some friction there for new users to create some good looking reports. So I really like the ability to be able to extend this further into all users inside Fabric and not leaving the pro and premium users out of this.
Well, here's a question. So I think we're both in agreement that this is obviously a barrier that's been removed, and we're all in agreement. Like, good, keep going. Good job, Microsoft. But let me ask you here, because obviously there are going to be some restrictions simply around you have a capacity, so it can only handle so much data or so much processing at once. Who are you giving this to in your organization? And I'll preface it a little here. If I have my hardcore Power BI power users, I have people who dabble in building models and reports, and we obviously are touching Fabric. I'm thinking here like I can't give it to everyone, or at least a single one, without obviously running into some just capacity throttling.
Mm-hmm.
So who's the primary audience if you're gonna, from an adoption point of view, who are you focusing on first?
What do you mean? Which users?
What
What users are going to get the
persona?
most impact from
Yeah,
this?
yeah.
Mm. Well, I'm going to probably throw this at people that are brand new to Power BI.
Mm,
Right? I mean, this is, if you're an expert, you're probably not. I mean, me as one who's a pro developer who's been doing this for quite a while. I don't spend as much time like mucking around with like the auto generation features of things. I just make what I want to make because I know how to make stuff, right? I don't, you know, I can go to DAX Query View and just make my measures. I don't have to go to DAX Query View and explain my measures. However, a new user would be very interesting to go into DAX Query View use Copilot and say, hey, I am interested, explain this measure. What should I use here? What are some, what does the summarize columns function do in DAX? This is something that comes from Copilot inside the DAX query view. So I think from that standpoint, that's really interesting to me, to be able to have like a coach, right? So new users kind of need a little bit of a coach next to them to kind of get through these initial like hurdles of building some basic measures, right? Um, uh, uh, Eugene Midler has done a really good diagram of how he learned DAX, and has a really good diagram of like where things are easy. So I use it all the time in my training because it's so good. But the easy things are summarization, averages. Like this makes sense on top of a single column. But it's when you get into like filter context transition, like how do I do a percent change? That's when people's heads start melting. When you're like new, when you're starting out, you're like, wait, what? What do I have to do? How do I build this? What's the context of my single data point? So in that initial stage of understanding and unpacking how to make a DAX measures in the model, I really think this Copilot portion for that would be very useful. And it would also be nice if Copilot could do a little bit of like SQL BIing on top of this, right? You could have a slow measure or a slow visual. Again, it's not there today, but it would be nice if Copilot could just take note and say, hey, this visual slow, I've run the performance analyzer, or I see your performance analyzer output. Here's the measure that appears to be slow. When I look at this measure, it has some bad practices. You're using an all statement in here. You probably shouldn't do that. Here, we might suggest you rewrite it like this. That's when I think when it can suggest some minor changes that improve performance, that could be really impactful there.
I don't know why, but when you said that, I think Copilot will help a lot of new users learn evaluation context. My heart rate went up slightly. I could feel it. I'm looking at my watch right now. That's, I mean, that's a tough one. I'm going to differ with you on the primary audience or the first audience here. I like that one. I really do. And I think that's a great one. But to me, if I'm a brand new user, I'm thinking, okay, how much are you even using Copilot today? Do you even know where to start? But to me, the primary audience here, or who I want to first enable this for, I'm not saying the other ones are not important, but who am I going to focus on first? I'm focusing on power users in Power BI to get them using Fabric products and services. Because, Mike, how many we talked about Power Query and the evolution is from that data engineering point of view that you're going to be notebooks or you're going to be doing something in pipelines, right? Or what the applications of Gen 2 are if I'm coming from Gen 1 data flows. So I think the ease of use for someone who already knows kind of what they want to do with their data, but they're not like, again, they don't have any skill or knowledge or experience in notebooks. Hello, this is perfect for, hey, we're going to ramp you up to Fabric. And this is where you have a coach where I know the questions to ask. And I think that's where I'd be weary with new users as my priority, because I don't even know if they're going to know what to ask. I know we've talked about the report, like build a visual for me, build a report page. But if they're not aware of the data and they're just starting off, I think they're going to have not the desired outcome. This goes back to Kurt Bueller's article on when he used Copilot. If you don't know how to ask the right question, you're probably going to not get the right answer.
That's an article from SQL BI initially, and I think Kurt on that with but ask better. I mean, I've even told my son this.
You have to.
I've been teaching my kids this. Ask better questions. I can give you better answers. So like, I get a lot of questions from the kids, like just random, hey, why did that do that? Well, don't just ask me the question. Why is your blinker always on? Like, because that's like, something like that. But like, actually, specify that it is. All right. So Tommy, I don't know if you've been following the comments in the chat here. We have to do a little bit of a walk back here. So, Guy in the Cube has reread the article that was just recently published. And again, this is maybe this is credence to us. This article is confusing. We're not
smarter than we think we are. Okay.
We were smarter than we thought we were. So this FCC capacity would allow you to extend Copilot into Pro and Premium. That does exist. However, the FCC switch or toggle will only exist on an F64 and higher. So when correction. The FCC feature does not exist on an F2 through F32. You can only turn it on an F64, but once you turn it on at X64 level, you can go use it in non-Fabric workspaces or elements. So it's basically saying you have Copilot at an F64. We want to give that to users in other workspaces so they can leverage it. This changes my opinion now because I wanted the former option. I want it to be added to any capacity.
So I already have to. So just so I heard you correctly.
Yeah, let's unpack this again.
I just want to make sure. So
we got to correct it for the recording here.
We may have to restart the podcast today.
We got to start over. Totally threw us off.
You have to have an existing F64 even to get started.
Correct. There is no F2 capability in this one. Yeah.
Oh.
I'm disappointed because I would be willing to try this out if I could do this all the way down to an F2.
Did we miss that?
No, no, it's in there.
All right.
It's in there. I'm gonna search for the word F64 on the article right now, and I'll read you the line where it says this.
Well,
all right. Okay. So, what is the Fabric Copilot Capacity?
Okay.
Fabric Copilot is a feature that allows users to utilize Copilot even if their reports are not on the F64 capacity.
Which sounds like what we've been talking about.
Yes. Does the FCC have a size or SKU restriction? Bullet point number 3 in the Q&A portion at the very bottom, it says, only a P1/F64 or greater can be labeled as a FCC. So
I thought that was a typo because I'm like, with everything else that was being said.
Nope. It is still limiting us to the F64. So this is where I'm like, meh, like the wind had just gotten taken out of my sails. I'd really like to see this down to the F2 level or even some smaller SKU. Like this doesn't help me then. Like you're still at that barrier. Yeah. Now it's time to go. All right, Tommy, it's time to go install our own DeepSeek on this thing and run this thing for pennies on the dollar, man. What's going on?
Can I install Fabric on my Raspberry Pi? That's what I want to know. So.
Yes.
So, but
the very bottom of the article is where this feature, like it's where it calls this out, and that should have been like front and center at the top of the article. Like, hey,
it has to be. You can't.
Hey, this is a F64 P1 feature that you can turn on, and so let me just unpack the feature again one more time. It means if you have an F64 and you want to delegate it to other non-Fabric workspaces, you can do so. So this is giving Copilot to non-Copilot workspaces only after you've reached the F64 level.
It simply helps organization. Yeah, it only helps organizations who have had or consider the caution of the problem that, hey, I don't want Copilot to eat up all my F64.
Yeah, correct.
And that's what that's doing. But for everyone else, what we were, praising the heavens for, still outside looking in, still in the cold.
I mean, it really feels to me like how much Copilot capacity could be run. I mean, this is where I would argue, like, I really would want this to maybe run on, like, is it worth the spend, right? Are we going to find that much value from Copilot that I'm going to spend, $5,000 and dedicate a single capacity to Copilot-y things? Or, does it make more sense for me to say, look, I'm willing to spend an F2 or F4 level of Copilot capacity that's adding enough value for me? So this is where we talk a lot in the podcast around adding the balance between value and cost, right? If you are using Copilot and finding an immense amount of value, you'll pay more for it. But if I'm thinking about this, like if we haven't tested it out yet, we can't even get our hands on it, then how do I test the value?
All right, Mike. And I know some people don't really care sometimes when we have, we'll say, less than optimistic takes on things, but this is one of those times.
Yeah.
I got a problem. I got a big problem with this because when we're dealing with LLMs, and that's what Copilot is, and that's what the agents are, Copilot Studio, that's text-based. I am failing to see how much of a problem this is for this to get integrated into a model that already has my measures, right? I'm not asking Copilot to look at a billion rows. I'm looking at to look at my measures, where the thing that takes CPU or agents the time to generate is really over text. It's over text-based applications. And yet, Copilot agents, if I were to develop Copilots, I'm doing that right now on a bunch of projects.
Yep.
The cost is anywhere close to a F64 license or anywhere close to what a Copilot capacity would be. I can have a 10 Copilot agents right now, and I'm not even sniffing the cost of here. How can I have Copilot for whatever is it, $20 a month for my entire office, which you can go through all my SharePoint,
Okay.
and you know, like it's going through all my documents, which
Yes.
has to not just look at all my 1,000 of freaking files in SharePoint, but then has to actually look at the files in the Word documents, and it goes quickly.
So this is my point here, taking to your point, Tommy. Like, this is where I think the co-piloting piece is confusing to me, because there's licensing at many different levels. I've bought the Office Copilot license.
Yeah.
How do I use it all the time, every day? Nah, not really. Do I use it sometimes? Yes. I have it rewrite some emails, or start some things. So it's valuable to me. Saves me some time in certain areas. But is it life shattering for me? Is it something like I really need this one? I'm not sure it's that compelling yet. Like, when I'm generating like marketing content or images or things like that, dude, I will pay for AI all day long. Like, I use other creative programs to generate stuff. If I could feed it more, like thumbnails, right? Hey, we're going to build more thumbnails, or write descriptions for this video, or that's where I think a lot of this AI stuff for me adds a lot of value. Do I find an immense amount of value for it rewriting my emails? Not so much. But to your point, Tommy, if I'm already paying $20, why isn't that $20 also being paid for by Copilot and Power BI? That seems like a place I would want to use this more often. And now let's talk about GitHub Copilot.
Goodness, good. Which
it's
who owns
free.
Microsoft? Who owns GitHub?
It's free.
Come on, man.
The GitHub Copilot is free. I mean, again, granted, it's slower. It won't go as fast, but they throttle you a bit there. But like, that portion of the Copilot piece is free. So interesting. So I feel like this has been an emotional episode for me. I got really hopeful when I heard tell me the feature was coming down to a lower SKU level. And I feel like the wind has really been taken out of my sail, knowing that it's going to be only at a 64 level.
The irony of the GitHub Copilot, Mike, is I can't use Copilot in the service, but if I use GitHub, I can use GitHub Copilot all over my Tyndall files.
That's true.
I can do everything I want. So
yes, that's true.
So that's like hacking the system. And Mike, to the point of the general Copilot you buy in Office, if you really want it to be impactful, you got to create an agent. You have to create a Copilot Studio, because that can actually look at a SharePoint folder. Mm-hmm. Again, going back to what we're talking about in a specific data model or data set. And here's the thing too, with Copilot in Fabric, it's not necessarily going through, at least if I'm using the notebook one, I'm not asking it to, hey, I want you to look at all of my models in this workspace and then do something. It's helpful for, I am trying to do this. I want to add a column. It's very still general. So yeah, I'm with you, Mike. That's my rant. I'm going to pause there from a skeptic or pessimistic point of view, but come on.
There's been a lot of news announcements in general around AI-based things, and so one of them is, there was this whole idea of like copilots are not going to become actionable; they're going to do actions with things, right?
Well,
so that was what was it? There's like a OpenAI just released, like, they have their $20 subscription for like Copilot, or not Copilot. They have their own version of OpenAI generative stuff, right? So they have a $20 a month fee for that. Now they have a $200 a month fee for like another AI, but it's based on actions. It can do things for you. I want you to go open this website and do these things, and like, to me, that's where I'm starting to see things are going to be very effective in the Copilot space, right? When can Copilot start making a single visual, or, hey, Copilot, make me 5 variations of a bar chart using this, and this field? That's the kind of stuff that I want to start seeing it do and generate, because that would make more sense, because then it could just, again, the thing I think is important here is Copilot can then have some pre-prompting, like an agent, Tommy, like you were saying, right? Yeah. Build an agent around visual builds, right? And that agent is able to quickly go through and give you, here's 6 different visuals I've built you, different styles. This one has titles on, this one has titles off. And it even could tell you, I built this visual to be more minimalistic. I built this visual to have like a dark theme. I built this visual to have a light theme. And it's more verbose. Like, I added data labels here. It should just give you an array of things to pick from and say, which one do you like? And you should be able to hit it, and boom. Because it saves. Have you ever watched the guy? He's on YouTube. How to Power BI is the YouTube channel.
That narrows it down. What he said. So
the how to, Boz, I think is his name. Yeah,
Boz. I
it's
know the Boz, but that's from the 80s.
okay, that's
No.
different. This guy's he's current. So he does a lot of how to videos and like how to explain how to build a visual. And his visuals are beautiful, by the way. He's like, hey,
Oh,
how
I
to
know what
make
you're talking about. He's great.
you know what I'm
Yeah,
talking about? He's
phenomenal.
great. Really, really good creator. I love the stuff that he comes out with. I learn a lot from him. But every time I look for this, I look exactly at that feature and I go to myself, I'm like literally counting the number of clicks that he had to do to get to this thing. It's like click this, adjust that, change this, set this, do this. And we're probably like 20 clicks deep every single. So now me as a user, I have to memorize 20 clicks to get to a bar chart that now looks like a
Slightly prettier.
box and whisker chart.
Yeah.
Like, or I have to do all these settings to get to a chart that looks like this. There's so much friction. To me, that's the barrier to entry, right? That's where Copilot should be finding and fixing these things, right? We should be feeding Copilot a whole bunch of like defined, here's a bunch of stylized visuals. I should be able to say, I need a box plot and say, look, I can style it for you. Here you go. Here's the style for you. Like that's the kind
So
of stuff I think that Copilot would really make easy for us.
you know, you're onto something here because I think Microsoft's greatest, I think, asset right now, I think is something that they're working on is that ability where like with OpenAI or other products, you have to really build it up. Like it's not out of the box going to work with the general Copilot with Fabric. Like, I mean, I can just create a database right away. Awesome. To your point about the model idea, would you rather than with Copilot in an ideal world, like OpenAI is doing right now? They have all these different types of models. One's better at tasks. One uses advanced reasoning. One's best at reasoning. One are better for searching the web. I would almost love rather than a single Fabric Copilot, and I know there's multiple Copilots that do other things, but rather than purchasing a single Copilot everywhere, why couldn't I have a coding Copilot in Fabric and a model Copilot where, hey, I want a Copilot just to look at models so I can build my reports. Other ones, just help me with code. Just help me when I'm in a notebook on what the right function is or help me create a function to do X. I don't need you to look at the entire lakehouse on all the data in there. Would you rather that or do you want them to keep going with the singular Copilot? If you were to purchase individual copilots for coding, for visuals, for model building.
I don't want to spend money on this. I mean, really, what I want. I mean, honestly, right?
Okay, sure.
Isn't
Yeah.
isn't the whole concept of? I mean, my understanding, and this could be my lack of not building them myself, right? So agents, right? So if you're talking about Copilot agents or you're building your own agents, right? My whole understanding of an agent is you're building the agent in order that you're able to predefine some prompt, then like you're basically predefining a prompt. Hey, this is the format I want you to think about. This is the output I want you to give. Only right answers. Like you're pre-prompting the model and basically prompting it a couple times before you actually give it your final prompt. So the agents are pre-prompting or adding additional text or context to what you're going to ask the final question to. Right. I saw a little YouTube short. Some people were discussing, careers in the future. Right. And they said, what do you push your children into? Like what research areas do you put your kids in? Right. Do you have them become lawyers? No. A lot of the lawyering and all the mundane, searching through text and writing, a lot of that's being handled more and more by AI. Like large language models are doing a lot more of that. Do you tell your kids to go be like all these different careers and a lot of these other, like, do you tell your kids to go be like a marketing, a copyright or not copyright, but making marketing copy, right? Build images, build words, build marketing. They're now finding that companies are now using AI to generate marketing copy very cheaply, and it's millions of dollars less than it would have been paying a third party organization to do this one. So, people are going to get wind of this. Third party organizations are going to use AI to build your marketing copy for you, and you're going to be like, "That was just AI generated. Did you even read it? Like, is there even a person involved here?" And so, I think what's happening here is we're seeing a huge shift. And then, again, watching another interview with Sam Altman, he's like, in the near future, not 1 year, but like 5 years, 10 years down the road, this AI stuff is going to greatly shift which type of skills people need in order to do the next line of work. So I think this is going to really shift things here. And to your point, Tommy, back to your question, right? Do we build hyper specified models? I don't want to pay for them. I want a library, just the same way I go to like GitHub Models. You can go to GitHub Models today, and you can run models right off of GitHub in preview. Just go there and run models.
Sure.
Llama, OpenAI's version, like all ChatGPT stuff. Like there's a whole bunch of other things that are directly on GitHub you can just go use. That's what I think it should be more like. It should be more like, hey, Copilot is exposing all these libraries of large language models to you, and you should be able to pre-prompt it. And so, Tommy, to your point, if your organization has 3 or 4 models, you should be able to write a agent to say, look, these are the 3 models I want you to care about. Study up on these models. I've severely documented them. I've added a bunch of descriptions. I've added titles. I've added measures. I've done all the things to let the large language model understand them. So study these 3 models. This is what I want you to be really good at. And I think that potentially will give you a lot more runway, right? Tommy is going to roll out Copilot for his organization. He's going to
Copilot for marketing data.
Yeah. Tommy's going to roll out this Copilot for marketing data. He's going to attach it to this workspace. It's going to run on this capacity, and Tommy's already pre-prompted it. Tommy's done some agent work with it. And by the way, it's more catered to that need or that team. And let me give you another picture of this, right? Let's imagine we're a data team and we're sucking in a whole bunch of like transcripts from like conversations on phone calls, right? So you're using one somewhere else. There's an AI that's transcribing voice conversation into transcripts. There's large language models. You can say, you feed it the conversations and say, here's the conversations my customer is having. Give me act as if you're my customer. Let me ask questions to my customer. So there should be a model, and I think this should be supplied through Copilot, right? This would make sense. Bring the Copilot experience, let Tommy build the voice of the customer agent, land that inside my Power BI reports. That's what we should be doing. And Copilot should be funding all of that cost or running. That's when I think things make sense.
And I'd be willing to pay for agents specific to Fabric. And I know you say you don't want to pay for anything, Mike. I don't want to pay for the line in my TV. I don't want to pay for the line in my TV, but it's bothering me, and I gotta fix it.
If I'm already buying Fabric, just let me. It's up to me to decide to like the same thing happens with like SQL Server or the Fabric SQL.
Sure.
So SQL inside Fabric or pipelines versus data flows Gen 2. Everything uses compute. So why do I care what I'm using? It should just be part of the package.
Well, I think we're realizing still the whole, let's go back round trip to this GPU thing. I don't think these Copilots are cheap at all for Microsoft to do in terms of also how much this probably, I haven't heard from a client yet. I don't know if you have, but I haven't heard of how much Copilot sucks up in a F64 capacity if it's used on a daily basis. It could be like where it's like, whoa, I can't do anything else but Copilot. This is insane. Again, I'm saying this where it would make sense for it to be a separate payment. I do, where we are with technology today, I can understand that because it's intensive. It's labor intensive to get your something working like that. But at the same time, well, shoot, like you said, don't scour my entire universe of data. Let me choose what I want. Let me be hyper focused, and then we'll go as a pay as you go for an agent point of view. If you're already doing that, where I guarantee you most organizations have more files than data, and I can do this on a Copilot agent in the Copilot Studio. Well, my friend, we have a model. We have a way to work that way, and I will end there.
Okay.
So.
Good episode. Sorry if this episode was confusing. So people hopefully listen through the whole way through on this episode because there's a lot of things to unpack in this episode. Let's just quick. So I'm not going to do final thoughts. I'm actually just going to summarize what we talked about today because we kind of waffled a little bit on the conversation. So let me just re-summarize what we heard here and we read the article. All right. So the how do you use Fabric Copilot Capacity (FCC)? All right. So if you have an F64 SKU and you want to use portions of that F64 SKU or P SKU, turning on Copilot for other parts of your organization, you can do so. So what this does, this is a feature that allows you to go to your F64 or P1 SKU capacity in the admin settings, turn on a setting that allows users to use this, go to the capacity setting, and turn on this feature. Once this feature is turned on, other users can be assigned to that capacity to run just Copilot, meaning you have a Power BI Pro workspace. A premium per user workspace is not supported yet, but eventually it's on the roadmap. If you want to use it on an F2 capacity, so the usage of Copilot can be given across more of the organization, but you're still required to start with the F64 capacity. Is that a good summary, Tommy? Did I miss anything?
I think Copilot would be happy with that summary.
Okay.
So
we should run this back through. We'll run it back through Copilot, and we'll say, what did you think of Mike's summary at the end? Did he get it right? Was the feature correct? So that being said, that sounds like the feature that we're talking about here. We do appreciate your time. Thank you for hanging out with us as we unpack these Copilot and large language models inside Power BI and usage. Let us know your experience. Have you turned this on? Would you want to use this feature? Please let us know down in the comments. I'd love to hear more from you in the community on where and if this is a good feature for you. Is your organization asking for this feature to be existing? With that being said, Tommy, we really appreciate everyone listening to the podcast. Please share with somebody else, but where else can you find the podcast, Tommy?
Oh my goodness. You can find us on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast. Make sure to subscribe and leave a rating. It helps us out a ton. And please share with a friend since we do this for free. Do you have a question, idea, or a topic that you want us to talk about in a future episode? Head over to PowerBI.tips/podcast, leave your name and a great question. And finally, join us live every Tuesday and Thursday, 7:30 a.m. Central, and join the conversation on all of PowerBI.tips social media channels.
You heard it here first. We're confused about this new feature. Hopefully this adds some clarity to what you're talking about. Have a great week, and we'll see you next time.